I want to thank, to begin with, the member from Moncton Northwest for bringing forward this resolution. It's an important issue that needs to be addressed on the floor of this Legislative Assembly. I want to thank the member from Fredericton Grand Lake for her courage to relate her own experience on the floor of this Legislative Assembly. In doing so, she has just, I think, made a difference for many others who've been victims of sexual assault. To hear her experience shared in this House says a lot, will say a lot to a lot of people. And I want to thank the member from Moncton East for her speech. Very passionate and important words that she said. Mr. Speaker, this issue is one that's received some attention for a couple of years now. It's interesting because in 2015 I was approached by a constituent, an activist who was quite keen on seeing legislation governing campus sexual violence brought forward. So I had actually drafted a bill to do that. There were some examples in Canada and the United States. There had been a lot of publicity, which was important at the time, on what was happening on campuses in Canada, across the United States, and in New Brunswick. So it really had brought the issue to the fore for many people. But at that time, it turns out the University of New Brunswick and St. Thomas University in particular were working with the Fredericton Sexual Assault Crisis Center in developing sexual violence policies for their campuses. So I held the bill back, Mr. Speaker, so that it didn't interfere with that process. It was important that those policies get developed. I didn't want the university's administrations to feel like, well, maybe they didn't need to move forward if the province was going to create legislation and so on. So through 2016 and 2017, sexual violence policies have been put in place at most of our universities, UNB, St. Thomas, MBCC, and University of Moncton, Mount Allison. University of Moncton was a bit slower, and I know in March of this year it still hadn't been completed, but there was work underway to bring an institute a sexual violence policy for that campus, Mr. Speaker. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have legislation, and I believe we do. Should have legislation because we want to ensure that the policies meet high standards. As the leader of the official opposition said, that they're living documents, that they're reviewed on a regular basis, and that they are effective in doing the job they're supposed to do. Because it's not just the policies, but the procedures, of course, that are part of those policies that are so important, Mr. Speaker. So I think we need this bill. It will be helpful. It will make a contribution if passed into law, and it's not a difficult thing to put together, as I can attest to, because I did, as I say, draft an initial bill around this in 2015, which in the end I didn't present here before the Legislative Assembly, but I can tell the government that the work in terms of drafting a bill on this matter is straightforward. And so I would encourage them to do that. That's why I cannot support the amendment that the Minister of Post-Secondary Education has brought forward, and I will vote against the amendment and would like to see the unamended original motion go through. Mr. Speaker, the issue here, in fact, is around creating policies and procedures needed to address, respond to, and build awareness around sexual violence on campus, Madam Speaker, but also we ultimately want to see a focus on prevention. And Madam Speaker, that's an area where lots can be done. Madam Speaker, and that's something that would be good to see this government do more on, and we're not hearing much about that. But with respect to the substance of the motion, it's important that where it speaks to policies and procedures and response and awareness, it was mentioned that the University of New Brunswick right now has a campus sexual assault support advocate. So there's something concrete that government can support to ensure that all campuses, post-secondary institutions, have the funds, separate from the regular funding from the government, but targeted funding from the provincial government to ensure that every campus can employ and does employ a sexual assault support advocate. Madam Speaker, that would make a huge difference in the lives of students who have been sexually assaulted and been victims of sexual violence. So that would be definitely something that can be done in terms of concrete action. But with respect to the legislation or the bill that might be put in place, just let me read what I had originally proposed regarding policy requirements in the bill I had originally drafted. And that was that each institution shall develop, enact, and maintain a statement of policy regarding such institutions' campus sexual assault programs, which shall be aimed at the prevention of sexual assault, and the procedures followed once the sexual assault has occurred. So, the first part dealing with particularly aiming those programs at prevention, and then procedures followed once the sexual assault has occurred, Madam Speaker. And I might say prevention education needs to start way earlier than university or college. It needs to start in our public school system, Madam Speaker, and there's much to be done there. One of the opportunities, Madam Speaker, is to use the arts, to use theatre for getting the message across, Madam Speaker, and there's real possibilities there. This summer, in the Notable Acts Festival, a play was put on this very topic called It Happened at a Party. And it would be great to see that play or plays like that dealing with the same subject matter performed by young people touring our schools. I do have a bit of a bias here, of course, because my daughter wrote the script, but that aside, as being objective as I can, this kind of thing is the sort of thing that will help build awareness among students at an early age. The policy described in this previous section I read in the draft bill would have suggested that it addressed the following areas: education programs to promote the awareness of sexual assault, possible sanctions to be imposed following the determination of on-campus disciplinary procedures, procedures students should follow if a sexual assault occurs, including who should be contacted, the importance of preserving evidence in the case of proof of criminal sexual assault and to whom the alleged offense should be reported, and procedures for on-campus disciplinary action in cases of sexual assault, and so on. So it goes on to some length here, Madam Speaker, but I think the members get the flavor of it. So something like this, based on the best of what's already been done in Canada in terms of legislation, should be brought before this House and should be passed into legislation, Madam Speaker. That is something I think certainly on the side of the House both parties want to see happen. I don't really understand at all why the Minister of Post-Secondary Education proposed an amendment to that to strip any content really out of the motion in terms of real action, Madam Speaker, because with this bill it will result in real action, and I can imagine other actions that the government might be inspired to take as a result of this bill, like ensuring funding is available for every university and college to employ a campus sexual assault support advocate, Madam Speaker. So I don't understand why he would have proposed an amendment to strip out the content. It doesn't make any sense to me, Madam Speaker. Yes, obviously, the We all want to see a world without sexual violence, and that means fundamental social change, Madam Speaker. That means ending the hierarchical, unequal situation we have in our built into our culture right now, Madam Speaker, and ending domination, because when someone is dominated or thought of as less than oneself, they become the other and easy to exploit and victimize. And Madam Speaker, that social change is necessary. And much should be done to help bring that societal change about, so that we could live in a world without sexual violence, Madam Speaker. It needs to be seen as a priority. And this bill sends that message, I think, that it should be a priority. The New Brunswick Student Alliance, whom I also met with, has identified it as a priority. This bill would send, I think, a strong signal that addressing and dealing with sexual violence in New Brunswick is a priority. That it's unacceptable, and that we are taking one small step towards the kind of change that's necessary to end sexual violence. But as I said, there's much more to be done. Any activity that's undertaken, needs to be done in ways that bring in the experts, like the people who work at the Fredericton Sexual Assault Crisis Centre. Lorraine Wally, who's been the executive director there for some time, has provided extraordinary leadership, as her colleagues have done, to advance overall New Brunswick society's response to sexual assault, and have provided tremendous expertise to universities who have been developing sexual assault policies, to the police, and to other agencies. So they are the kinds of experts we need to rely on. But we need more support for sexual assault crisis centers like the one in Fredericton. It may be of interest for people to know that there are no other sexual assault crisis centers in the province. There are none. Besides the one in Fredericton. They're trying to cover, the field, but there needs to be support for other regions of the province to ensure they have sexual assault crisis centers as well. And of course, we've got the one in Fredericton who can help get them going with the tremendous experience and expertise they have and have developed over time, Madam Speaker. So that's another action that government can take, that perhaps this bill, if it became reality, would inspire, to ensure that the kind of expertise and experience that has been built up in the Fredericton Sexual Assault Crisis Centre, and the resources and the assistance they provide, which is tremendous, is readily available in all four corners, all the regions of New Brunswick. And that's important. That would also suggest that this is a priority, this kind of action, Madam Speaker, for this government to address sexual violence and sexual assault. So, Madam Speaker, those are initiatives that could happen, that should happen, and that I think by passing the bill that's being proposed in this motion, or introducing a bill that's being proposed in this motion, would be a first step in that direction, and I would hope be an inspiration for further action along the lines that I've been talking about. I don't see how this can be said to be a priority of government, Madam Speaker, if there isn't adequate funding to ensure there are sexual assault crisis centres in each region of the province, to ensure that there are campus sexual assault support advocates on staff, in place on each of our campuses in New Brunswick, Madam Speaker, and I don't see how it can be said to be a priority by the government if it's unwilling to bring in legislation to deal with sexual violence on campus, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I will be voting against the amendment and do support the original motion.